Well, I can tell you for certain that Norm and myself and Ted's goal tonight was not to impress you, or the video either. But I think one of the things that we wanted to do this evening is really kind of create an awareness of the challenges we're facing. You know, I reminded many of you know the story of the frog that's put in a pan of water and it just warms up slowly and the frog dies. But if you put that same frog in a hot pan of water, it jumps out. And at some level, I think as we look at some of our challenges in the future, we kind of need that shock as to what are the challenges we're facing, and therefore, are we willing to confront those challenges? Are we willing to take those challenges on? You know, I actually tonight want to share with you a number of things on this agenda, but one of the areas that we really would like you to lead with is really these two questions of what if and why not. You know, what if we don't, as a community, embrace change, capture the opportunities that change presents us? And then the other question is, why not? Why wouldn't we put in initiatives, take actions to capture those opportunities? Because technology has always been an enabler, but it's also been a divider. You know, in many cases, the history of the cooperative I get the pleasure of working for is really that history. If there were people 75 years ago that did not take advantage of bringing electricity to rural America, it's hard to tell what rural America would look like today. But there are people who took advantage of that and decided we're not going to have a divided country, a divided metropolitan areas from rural areas, but we're going to create common opportunities among those who live in the rural area and those who live within the communities. You know, I grew up in I was actually born in 1962. Kenny Josie, I know, was born in 1962 as well, right? Kenny, sorry I gave away your age. But, there was a cartoon created in 1962. Anybody know what that cartoon was?
Yes.
Actually, go ahead. What cartoon was that? Anybody? I can't seem to get this over. I'm going to show you the cartoons. Yeah, you guys love technology. Can somebody just sit in? But anyway, in 1962, while he's bringing that up, it was a cartoon created that really captured the imagination of a lot of young people. Of course, I was just born in 1962, so it didn't necessarily capture my imagination in '62. But what's interesting about that cartoon, it only had 24 episodes, from my understanding. It didn't play much in the 1960s because it was created in black and white. But it repeated itself, or they repeated it in the 70s and 80s. So many of us, probably many of you here, grew up seeing this.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy. Daughter Judy. Jane, his wife.
Many of you, I'm sure, have seen that many times. And what's interesting about, of course, that cartoon, again, many of us saw that on repeat throughout the 70s and 80s. Think about what that did to spark our imagination, to spark our innovation. Thank goodness for people who had imagination to really pose to us, what if the future could look like that? Does anybody know that Danny Graydon was the writer of this cartoon? Does anybody know what he was projecting, the technologies we see here, the time frame that he was projecting those technologies to come to fruition? Anybody know? He was projecting 2062, the next century. You know how many of the technologies that are in the Jetsons exist today? And go take a guess. How many of those technologies? Can you list some of them? 11 technologies that were cast in the vision in 1962 for the year 2062, actually we are using today. Flat screen TVs, treadmills, I've got them listed here, talking alarm clocks, robot housemaids, robot vacuums, the iWatch, tanning beds, clear elevator shafts, and tablets were some of the technologies that were cast in 1962 for 2062. We have the, I can take it back now. So I share that with you because one of the things that we want to, I guess, share with you tonight as you think about that, and Ted did a very good introduction in saying that, you know, talking about technologies and how we need to start embracing technologies, about the exponential growth of technology. So today, for a lot of times, we, like Danny Brady, are thinking that a technology won't come about for maybe 100 years, but here we are today using those technologies. But if we believe in the growth of exponential technologies, then we got to believe that if men and women today have imagination for technologies of the future, that maybe that future is only a year or 2 or 5 years away, and not, in this case, maybe 30 or 40 years away. I want to share with you as well, just real quickly before I get into kind of the what if and the why not, is what is smart communities? You can see up here on the screen an image that kind of shares with you what we mean when we say smart communities. But I wouldn't want you to leave here tonight thinking that smart communities is only about smart buildings, smart homes, smart health, smart education. I would really have you center on the center of that dial and recognizing it really is more about us having smarter collaborations. You know, I think it happens in every organization. I know it's happened in our organization. It happens in communities. It even happens with families, is that we do things in silos. We do things independently. And we're so fortunate we've got a number of people here from Oklahoma State University tonight and who does some great work at the university. One of the things we talk about frequently is how often there's projects, research projects going on within the same university that perhaps one professor doesn't know what the other professor is doing. That's not to say that's a bad thing, but think about how there's convergence of technologies. How can we leverage not only what's happening at the university, but how can we leverage what's happening in the community? So it's not just about these smart technologies. We wouldn't want you to leave here tonight thinking that. We want you to think about the fact of how can we be better at collaborating? How can we be better at creating collective intelligence? As you look at the TV screens, you can see that one of the things that we talk a lot about here, and I think is talked a lot about as we think about quantum computing, is business intelligence. And the analytic piece is not just a phrase, but it's about how do we make smarter decisions, make smarter investments through this business intelligence. And you can see on the graphic up here, meaning, do we really know what the community demographics are? You know, we've talked a lot about millennials, but do we really know who our audience is within the community and what their expectations are? Do we really know about all of our critical systems? We have critical systems, the city has critical systems. There's other critical systems within our communities that are owned and operated by other utilities. The question is, could we as utilities work closer together? Could we leverage assets? Could we leverage future technologies and therefore lower the cost to the constituents that we serve? How do we use land? How do we prepare to use land? You know, we do a lot of that within the city limits, but when you think about the challenges the city faces as they potentially grow out and annex, and we're working with professors like Dr. Hauer. Did I say that right?
Close.
Or did I mess it up entirely?
That's all right.
I do. I just call you Lance.
Yeah, that's fine. Call me Lance.
Lance is working with us on a new urban development plan, but how do we look at land beyond the city limits and prepare for growth in the future and do a better job of putting ourselves in a position to lower cost when we grow as a community? Knowing our economic conditions, knowing the challenges of our government, finding ways to do better civic engagement. All those aspects are things that we would say to you tonight define smart communities. It's not just about technologies, it's about doing these things better. It's about being more intelligent about our future. But I want to really drill in tonight on two really key questions that I hope you'll leave here tonight and think about. You know, I've always been, when I hear people say what if, the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm ready to be challenged. So if someone says to me, what if, you're really kind of ready for that ball to be thrown to you to be challenged. And I hope that if anything that we do tonight when we leave here is that as a community, as a group of leaders who are here, is that we're challenged to think differently. I think we need change thinking. I think that change thinking is not automatic. I don't think change thinking is easy. But I do think that our citizens expect us to think differently. And I'm not sure that might be the greatest gift we can give the next generation, is to think differently. So I would say to you tonight, what if we could grab a hold of new technologies, embrace new technologies, adopt new technologies, and position our community, Stillwater, differently than other communities? We're going to conclude tonight by talking about why not. What are things that we could do? And I'm going to ask you why not do those things to tear down this wall. So a little later, you're going to see this wall come down, because these are the obstacles you've heard in that video. The obstacles that we're facing, and really obstacles in many ways that are blinding our ability to see the future. I don't know about you, but if you've ever sat in a meeting in which the meeting gets taken over by all the challenges and all the obstacles. And if you've ever left a meeting like that, you kind of leave thinking, now, exactly what did we accomplish? I'll never forget, I was at a meeting, a aware meeting we call them, with our members, and I was sharing with our members all the challenges we were facing. And a lady sitting on the front row said to me, she said, I really wish you'd stop. And I said, okay. And she goes, I'm tired of hearing about all the challenges and problems that you're facing. I want to hear you talk about solutions. And I really think that a lot of times we get in meetings and we think the meetings are productive because we talk about all the challenges, but the reality is, I hope that one thing that we do tonight is we propose what are some solutions to these challenges. But before we do, let me just share with you some what-ifs as it relates to some of the challenges you're looking at here, because if you look at some of the data, you look at some of the information, and over here on this left wall here is some of the research we've been doing along with Oklahoma State University on what are some of the really mega trends that are happening not only in society but happening right here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, that we're going to have to address in order to position Stillwater for the future. And one of the mega trends, as you can see up here on this graphic, to the far left at the highest point, is urbanization. You heard it in the video. It is real. We're seeing that urban areas are made up of really populations of 100,000 or greater. And we look at the fact that young people are moving to the Dallas, Texas areas, and Houston's and other parts of the country where these amenities and these opportunities and these jobs that they're looking for, especially high-tech jobs, it's a challenge that we have to recognize and give consideration to. You saw the statistic in the video. So urbanization is something that we're going to have to give great consideration to. When you think about the fallout of that, think about the next challenge that you see up here that is an obstacle for us, is how that puts increased stress on infrastructure. I have such a tremendous respect, Norm, for what you do, because I can appreciate and understand that for many of us who operate businesses, we recognize when a business model is broke. And when you have a situation where revenues are declining and yet the demands for infrastructure are increasing, that's a broken business model. And that's one of the things we hope comes out of this smart community discussion, is how we begin to talk about a changed business model, a changed way of creating revenues within the city to pay for infrastructure and align the needs of infrastructure in our community. If you look at some of these numbers up here that are going to be required in terms of investments for future infrastructure, it's staggering. And of course, I'm certain we're not anywhere near where we probably need to be in terms of infrastructure expenses. But here's another thing I would share with you that's very interesting about this. And again, Ted brought this up about the idea of autonomous driving cars. I was in Chandler, Oklahoma today speaking to their Chamber of Commerce, and I brought up autonomous driving cars. And there was a couple in the back of the room, and she rolled her eyes at me, shook her head like I was just out losing my mind. And I can appreciate that. Not that I'm losing my mind, but I can appreciate that. That was new. And I think for a lot of people in our communities, these technologies are coming so fast that perhaps we're not recognizing what they possibly mean to us. But think about this for a moment. What if we're planning for road expansion because of congestion, and it takes 10 years to do the planning and build those roads? But what if autonomous cars reduce the congestion of a road by 30%? That's called a misalignment of investment. So when do we begin to talk about these technologies and how it totally changes the way in which we plan for infrastructure? That's why right now, and you're going to keep hearing me say this, we have a project that just got approved last week through the SCS Association, which Lance, I'm going to call him Lance, I apologize. He is a doctor, so I'll call you Dr. Lance, okay, so I'll mess up your last name. But is leading the charge on in regards to smart urban development. And the whole context of that is how do we change the way in which we do urban planning and consider these types of technologies. Another challenge, or what if this increased competition that's been mentioned tonight in terms of retail sales, a good one to talk about in terms of what we're seeing with online sales. It was made comment about Walmart. If you haven't seen Walmart bought Jet.com, they're projecting next year for their online sales to go up 30%. They're saying this year online sales at the holidays will be the highest it's ever been. In 2015, it increased by 16% on average. In a lot of communities that are smaller communities, not urban areas, they're saying that number is more like 40% increase in 2015. So think about that, what that means to the revenue stream of not only a Stillwater, but put that in the context of a Chandler or a Guthrie or an a Stroud, or even these smaller communities who don't even have those retail chains that potentially can compete against that. But I would also tell you, if you look over here to my left, how many of you have heard of these companies? Uber, Facebook, Alibaba, Airbnb. Think about the change in business model here for a moment. Can you imagine sitting in a room and people are strategizing, they're saying, you know what, I want to become the largest taxi cab company in the world, but you know what, I don't want to own any taxis. Now, I would have walked out of the room. I was like, how do you do that? Or you're part of Airbnb and you say, you know what, I want to be the largest accommodation provider in the country, but I don't want to own any real estate. Or I'm Alibaba and I want to be the largest retailer, but I don't want to own any inventory. Or I'm Facebook and I say I want to be the largest media content provider, but I don't want to provide any content. Every one of those do what I just said. And think about the competitive advantage they have over others who own taxis, who own real estate, who own inventory, and have to create content. That's the changing business models that are happening in our communities. And the question for you and I is, what if we don't recognize that? What if we don't start embracing those changes and finding ways to confront those challenges? Something more closer to home to us is solar. Monty Justice, who's here with us tonight, Monty has a solar array at his home. I want you to look at this staggering chart that you see on this TV here. Back in, I think, the 1997, many people believed that solar would never compete with grid power, if you will. But if you flash forward to 2013, the parity level of grid power, if you will, for solar was going to be $1 per watt. And you can see now it's 7.74 cents a watt is what solar's at. Now, look at the city of Stillwater again. I believe the second highest revenue stream for the city is energy sales, am I right? So now you have the Walmarts, all the big box stores have said by 2025 they want to go off grid or become net zero. So I don't want to add salt to the wound, but what does that mean to a city? The city's generating energy sales and the big box stores start generating their own electricity. But even beyond that, Walmart has said we want to actually provide solar arrays on our facilities and provide it to the entire campus or the development that we're a part of. How does that change the equation for our community? What does that mean to utilities? I can tell you for our utility, those are kind of death spiral type things if we don't think about that and get out in front of those opportunities. That's why the building you're sitting in here today, and many people have asked, why would a utility company put in solar to serve their own facility? Why would you put in a building automation system and put in battery storage? The reason being is because we believe that that's where the market's going, even though it doesn't taste good, smell good, or feel good. We've got to embrace it and find out ways that we can take that technology and turn it into a business model. Can I sit here today and tell you we figured that out? No. But I do believe we're far more advanced than other utilities who are trying to build walls and trying to block technologies that are a reality and are going to change our lives and our organizations. Growing expectations. The video pointed it out. Think about the expectations today, not just of millennials, but think about the expectations of all of us. All of us expect when we, if you go to a restaurant today, just look around. How many people are talking versus looking at their cell phones? I've had to remind my wife and my daughters, because they're the ones doing it, not me. We need to collaborate. We need to talk. I'm probably as guilty as they are. But we're connected. And we're so connected anymore that we have increased our expectations of what we expect from service providers and different companies, meaning that they too are going to have to expand their capacity, their capabilities. But think about millennials too. My understanding, millennials are 2.5 times more likely to adopt new technologies. My daughter, when we went to the bowl game in Louisiana, I was fearful about using Uber. This has been a year ago, and I said, you don't even know who's driving that car. But they don't have any problem with that. I mean, they're using, they use Uber to go everywhere. And of course, she like many people, she went to the game and Uber knew that she had to get from the game back to the motel, and the cost was a lot higher. So I told her they learned a lesson on that one. But growing expectations, and again, not just expectations in terms of how we do live our lives, but just expectations in what they expect as far as amenities. Walking trails and bike trails and things that mean that it's the place to be. I mean, back in 2007, I believe, Gary, President Hargis appointed a number of us to go to a meeting that talked about the university as a part of creating this idea of making your community a place to live. If you haven't had a chance, by the way, I really encourage you to watch the video. Is it Boom, Bomb, and Bust, I think it is, that was done by Mayor Cornett. It talks about the challenges in Oklahoma City when they lost the United Airlines deal. and how important it was to figure out that they're going to have to create a place, such as what they did at Bricktown. And much like that is what we're seeing millennials are wanting, a place in which to live, a place that is more than just a place for a job, but some place that provides these kinds of amenities. The last thing is just exponential technologies. Think about the exponential growth of technologies. Now I would draw your attention to the TV screen for just a moment, because one of the things that I think we forget about exponential technologies is it starts with things becoming digital. So the first phase is when something becomes digital, it just becomes exponential. But then when you look at the second stage, which I think we find ourselves at to a large degree, is what's called the deception stage. In other words, we deceive ourselves into thinking that self-driving cars and drones, we have a few years before that comes. Exponential means the curve goes up, so we deceive ourselves in thinking we have time. I just read an article today that was in one of the headlines for Smart Communities, and it talked about that communities still have time to embrace self-driving cars. I'm thinking, a lot of people are thinking they're just now coming out, and they're putting it in the context you still have time. So it kind of gives you some indication of how we're deceiving ourselves and thinking we have a good amount of time. Stage 3 being disrupting business models. So in other words, then it becomes a very big disruption. And one of the things I think we have to be concerned about as a community is how do we potentially embrace it to where it's not as big of a disruption, to where we keep the continuity of our business, the continuity of our community. The fourth phase, they talk about dematerialization. Think about this for a moment. How many of you have a Garmin GPS system now? A few. Most of us use our phones and our iPads. How many of you have a camera that you own, that you take the film in and you have it developed? You know, dematerialization meaning that we don't own a lot of those materials anymore. They become an app for that. So we're seeing that a lot of devices, a lot of hardware, a lot of assets we used to have in our hands, we don't have anymore. What does that mean to our communities? Then the demonetization of things. I pay $500 for a Garmin. I don't pay anything for GPS today. And that demonetization is happening on a number of fronts. And then it talks about this last stage being democratization, meaning that access for everyone. And I'm going to share with you in just a moment, why not free Wi-Fi for everybody in the community? We used to laugh at that, but I would tell you today, I believe that's something we as a community are going to have to start thinking about. How do we create those types of access points to where our community begins to be the connected community that many future generations are looking for? So let me just share with you to kind of finish up the what if, and then I'll move on to why not. But just think about some technologies for a moment. What if, as far as city services, we work with a lot of developers. I know Ken Alexander here tonight, we probably have other developers here, but we have people who are constantly, going to buy land and do development. And what do they have to do? They have to work with probably 4 or 5 different service entities, whether it be the city, the electric utility, the cable company, whoever else may be. But what if that changed and where city services were more like a platform, where you go to one place and you know instantaneously who owns the land, who provides the electricity, who's the cable, and you sign up for all of it in one place. That's the kind of community that a lot of millennials and others are looking to, and how do we begin to think about those types of moves, those types of activities, and recognizing that whether it's a city service or even an electric service, a service from the county, that citizens have the opportunity to do that at one access point, more convenience, more efficiency, more productivity. The second thing I would share with you is just the citizens' experience in terms of the assets within the community. Think with me for just a moment. Anything that can be connected will be connected. Over to my left over here is a new LED street light. We're beginning to install this technology right now. And Jubal Hooker, who's sitting here somewhere in the room, who's right over here, has an iPad. And Jubal's going to turn that light on. He just turned it on. And he can dim it, turn it off. We're looking at deploying street lights and security lights here at Central, where throughout our system, thousands and thousands of security lights, we will monitor and control from here. We'll have the ability to turn them on brighter, to dim them. We'll have the ability to have our linemen, when they're out in the field, can turn them on and off. We'll be able to not only do that with security lights, but what if we had the ability to not only do that with one utility, but what if we worked with the city of Stillwater where we did one platform and we lowered the cost for all constituents and all members who own these public entities, and had one monitoring system, one security light system, one operation and maintenance. So those types of things, that these types of technologies are affording to us today, and technologies that we've got to start considering. One platform of communications. that we all work off of versus multiple and redundant. Norm and I talked about this, and I appreciate that it was talked about servant leadership. I say this often, this is not my co-op, it is the members' co-op. They own it, same as the city's assets are owned by the constituents. As public servants, as public facilities, how do we begin to take assets, resources, skills, competencies, and begin to leverage those on behalf of our constituents? And what would that mean in terms of tax cost, in terms of tariffs, in terms of rates, in terms of fees? Those are the kinds of opportunities that we believe we have in talking about smart communities. And that's why I say smart, because I think if we were to ask our consumers and ask our constituents what they thought about that, they'd say that's a pretty smart idea. And so it's those types of things that we would like to, again, continue to expand on. Transportation, you can see on the TV screen, this has been talked about several times. Uber, right now, is putting a pilot project in Pittsburgh with self-driving taxi cabs. So it's here. Right now in Arizona, I haven't experienced this because I don't go to Arizona a lot, but I hear that there have been people who have driven down the highways of Arizona and have seen semis without drivers in the semis, because they are now testing self-driving semis in Arizona. So again, what if we were able to embrace some of that technology, began to pilot that? Can you think about what this means in terms of freeing up land space? Because the understanding is when you move to self-driving autonomous cars, you really get rid of all the parking needs that are within the community. Just over the overall efficiencies, you increase the capacity of transportation by 30%. You remove the easements for right-of-way because the cars can drive closer together. So think of what these technologies could mean to us in the future. What if, on a communication standpoint, we did have a Wi-Fi communication? What if we did empower people to connect things so that we empowered and unleashed even more technologies that are being used through applications on our iPads and on our phones? But think about that a little further in terms of communications. I'm going to have Michelle go to the next slide there. Think about it in terms of medicine. I find this very fascinating. I don't know if you've heard much about this. I'm not in the medical field, but if you ever get a chance, you can go to a site called singularityhub.com. They're always constantly providing the latest in technologies. And they're doing a $10 million award for anyone who creates what's called the tricorder. Anybody remember the tricorder? Tricorder was in, if you go to the next slide, was in Star Trek. You remember it was the wand that basically went up and down your body and it gave you all the diagnosis of your health condition. And right now there are like 4 firms who are in the final stages of creating a tricorder. The tricorder would be able to basically give an analysis of all your health conditions and report that immediately to your health care provider. I know OSU is right now working on clothing, sensors within the clothing. They're talking about what that would do to reduce health care, because now senior citizens can live in the home in a longer time because their clothes would be able to communicate with health officials. The list goes on and on. It's just amazing. And we think about always trying to attack it from the standpoint of how do we take care of health insurance, when maybe we should be attacking it on how do we get better at technology and drive down the need for insurance. Those are the discussions that are taking place. So what if we could expand communication? Those are the kinds of things we're asking in this plan. And then, of course, water. Think about how scarce water is and has become. My understanding is that there are some, and I don't think this is in the city of Stillwater, so I want to make sure to say that. I don't know what the losses are in the city of Stillwater, but I do know on average they're anywhere from 16 to 20%. And from what I'm understanding, they're in some of the rural water districts as high as 50 to 60%. So here we are in a time we need more water. Why can't we use technology to both monitor and identify where those water losses are and get better at managing that? What if we did that? What if, from a business standpoint, we leverage technologies and we put businesses in our community in a position where they could leverage these technologies? And I want to introduce a few of those to you this evening. If you look down here to my right, these are 3D printers that we're already using. And Sean, if you will, held up one of the drones. So we're even in the process now of not just using drones, but we're using the convergence of 3D printers to print our own drones. So the reason we're doing that is because when it comes to parts, because we're planning on our linemen flying these drones, and so we're anticipating there's going to be some crashes. But we got to have the ability to just reprint an arm, to print the drone and use it for what we need it to be. So those types of technologies, if you'll notice over here, this pod that just came up. This is an exciting technology. We're working with Jamie Jacobs. Jamie over here from the UAV Institute at Oklahoma State University. Think about this. What if we could position this launch pod? We have 21 substations, and this launch pod will have the ability to send that drone out and inspect our lines. We spend nearly $10 million a year as a utility trying to identify and restore what we would call outages or maintenance issues. I truly believe we could see as much as a 20% reduction in that cost. How many are members of Central Electric Cooperative? If I were to tell you we could reduce the cost of O&M by 20%, would you be favorable to that by this technology? But here's what's exciting about convergence. We're talking emergency management about the fact that if we have these launch pods out there where you'll notice everything's automated, the door opens up, the drone lifts up, it'll be autonomous and fly down the lines. But what about emergency management? Why couldn't they use the same technology? What if we had emergency management call and say, hey, we need that drone to fly to this particular emergency? What if the city of Stillwater and us were working together and saying, you know what, we got a power outage here, let's fly the same drones. It gets back to smart use of investments and leveraging resources and assets, and as much as anything, as it's already been talked about, leveraging skills and competencies, because it's not easy to find talent to do these things, even though we're very fortunate and blessed to have some talent here that have created a lot of these technologies. Lastly, in terms of what if, and I'll move into why not, is what if, from an energy standpoint, what I shared with you earlier begins to happen, where we see renewables and different technologies begin to deplete the revenue streams of utilities in particular. We have about $150, $60 million in assets. And again, just like the city, it costs X amount to maintain those assets. And yet, as people put in renewables, revenues go down, but the cost of maintaining those assets remain the same. So here at Central, one of the things you see up here that we've done, beyond just the smart building, we put in what we call Progressive Resource Innovation Point, where you're at today is a business park. One of the things we've talked to the Chamber of the City about is that there is land available out here for probably at least another 8 business facilities. And what that basically means is that those facilities would operate off the same solar unit, off the same geothermal unit, off the same battery storage units. So what we're doing is doing a micro community. That's another part of the project with Oklahoma State University. So we can literally research these technologies and see how they would work in the future for other communities and other potential developers. With that, let me move on to why not. So let's do what if. What if we could do those things? But what I would tell you is why not put in place actions that literally begin to tear this wall down? Why not begin to look at a focused leadership development effort? You know, a lot's been said today about technology, but I think at the end of the day, it takes smart people in order to operate smart technologies. It takes smart people to make smart investments, make smart decisions. And so one of the things we would share with you, we really want to focus on in launching a smart community initiative is to talk and develop leaders who come together and begin to discuss smart community initiatives, smart technology, smart investments. And that really means things like regional stewardship. It means how do we lead change? It means how do we begin to engage businesses about social responsibility? I know Gary has led the charge, Gary Clark has led the charge on building a fund for economic development within the communities, and has reached out to many of us as businesses to say, we need your involvement and your input. I'm thankful I work for a board of trustees who believe in our social responsibility, who believe we got to put back into the community in order to see the community grow. And one of the things about developing leadership is how do we continue to talk to the business community about the need for that if we're going to confront these challenges and begin to bring the wall down. Why not create a model of smart communities that begins to focus on new alliances and a new ecosystem? You know, I think the days of the old, just traditional siloed approaches are not going to work. I go back again 75 years ago to the electric cooperative being established. At that time, that was a whole new model. And it wasn't just about establishing a cooperative, it really was about cooperation. It was about bringing together people together like those of us in this room and saying, we need to create new alliances, new partnerships, new thinking to confront the future. We need to have an entirely new urban development plan. Over 3 years ago, we had some of the most explosive growth we've ever experienced at Central Electric Cooperative. Unprecedented growth. We were averaging about 100 megawatts a year in capacity. In a matter of probably 12 months, we had requests from oil and gas producers of 250 megawatts of increased capacity. Now think about that. So it took us 75 years to build enough assets to serve 100 megawatts of capacity. And now we have a request for 250 megawatts of additional capacity. And these loads, think about this, these were loads that you can look at for every one of those pads that were out there. It was basically like putting a Walmart out in the middle of nowhere. And if you look at that in the electric industry, you don't build infrastructure for that, you build infrastructure for a lot of residential. I share that with you because when that happened, one of the things we did early on is we established a new model called a capacity integration model. And it was this simple. It was saying, what is the capacity being requested, and how could we meet that capacity through other means besides building new assets? Because every asset we build, somebody else is going to have to pay for if that revenue is not there. And I can tell you it worked, because we were able to serve all the capacity and reduce our investment cost by $50 million. What does that mean to our members? Almost $3 million a year in interest and depreciation on that plan. I share that because that's the concept of this new Smart Urban Development Plan, is how do we look at the capacity needs of our community and begin to look at technologies that we've talked about tonight and say, how do we put those technologies to work to potentially reduce our overall cost. The last element that I would share with you, I think it went by, is that of quality of life. So 4 elements: developing leadership, creating new alliances, a new urban plan, and a focus on quality of life, which really means about being the place to live. And understanding that really, when it comes to quality of life, it's really trying to maintain that quality of life we've experienced in our communities that's really under attack. How do we make sure we maintain safe neighborhoods in the future and use technology to assure our community and our citizens that we're doing it? How do we make sure we provide jobs, as Ted talked about a moment ago, and good paying jobs? You know, what's scary when you think about Stillwater, Oklahoma has a lot of service type oriented jobs. Those are not the jobs that are sometimes the high paying jobs. I'm not trying to be critical of any of those jobs, but they're not the higher paying jobs that a lot of the millennials are looking for in terms of technology and so forth. So how do we make sure that we maintain that quality of life? I share all that with you to lead to really the conclusion today, and that really goes back to what do we do? You know, I've shared with you a lot of what ifs, and again, I challenge all of us to say, why not? I began a smart community initiative that's really focused on these 4 basic premises, and my call to you and request to you tonight is to be a part of that coalition, that guiding coalition, to come together and start this process. We're going to be asking as many as 25 leaders. Hopefully some of you tonight, if you'll open up your packets, you'll see, and by the way, it's not going to ask you for a check, so don't be afraid of that. But there is a card in there, and that card basically talks about a leadership council. And what we're requesting is that we get at least 25 leaders from within our community to begin to meet and discuss and talk about developing a smart community plan. You can see this initiative up here. I would tell you this has been going on for about a year. A lot of these tools and methods are tools and methods we'll use to walk through this process. So really stage 1 will be to kind of do a situation analysis with the community and really kind of see where we're at, to do an assessment of our political climate, our economic climate, our social culture climate, our technological climate, to assess our leadership, to assess our critical resources. We're going to show you here in a moment some tools that have been developed to allow us to do that very efficiently and effectively. Stage 2 will be just to set some smart goals and strategies to begin to kind of cast that vision, to look at the future and say, what does Stillwater look like if we were to create a smart community? Stage 3 is really just setting priorities. We know we can't do it overnight. And it's going to take time. But again, a large part of this is about changing the trajectory of our community. Stage 4 is really understanding how important it's going to be to align the community. And of course, that happens throughout this process, which I'll kind of show you here in a moment. But how do we align our community? How do we get the community engaged to make sure the community is buying in to these ideas and these concepts and these goals and strategies? Really leading, in conclusion, stage 5, to this idea of having a plan that we can execute. And we can begin to see the fruits of what a smart community can mean to Stillwater. We have created a lot of tools over the last year. Some of those tools include online applications. So we have applications that include like a smart map that are going to allow us to create an inventory of assets. We have tools like simple things like contact managers and calendars and documents that can be stored online. We have an iPad application so people can collaborate collectively together. We have an online website We have tools also that are social media tools that we'll launch so we can engage the entire community in this process about smart communities. The process we anticipate would be probably a 12-month process. You can see kind of the introduction, the orientation. You can see things up there about cluster meetings, because one of the things we believe that there's a 25-member leadership council. It's going to take other clusters. And what we mean by clusters are other demographics, other sectors in the community, giving feedback, giving ideas, concepts into the process. And so that's really the process of the planning that we put in place. Again, that's going to evolve over time as well. So in conclusion, and I'd like to then open it up for questions, is that, this quote I really love: some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not. And I pose this to you again as why not begin a smart community initiative among those who are here tonight and others who are not able to attend, and begin to take advantage of these what-ifs that we saw tonight. Take advantage of investments, smart collaboration, smart collective intelligence, and begin to put this community on a different trajectory than any other community. I do believe that technology is an enabler. Technology can also be a divider. It can enable our community, not that we want to see this community necessarily knock other communities out, maybe a bad way of putting it, but I do think we want to separate Stillwater as the place to be. And I think we have the opportunity to do that if we come together and look at some of these opportunities and challenges that are in front of us. I'm going to stop there and leave it for some questions, because we really don't want to keep you past 8:30. It's 8 o'clock now. I went through that pretty quickly, but our goal tonight really was to give you some insight, awareness of what smart community is about, and what is before us if we were able to take a hold of that.